Hey neighbors, the handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company, along with Red Wizard apologist Jake Delmaro, and today we're talking about DDEX 3-1, Harried in Hillsfar, author Sean Merwin, editors Claire Hoffman, Chris Tulach, and Travis Woodall. This is another 5 1-hour mod tiered specifically for level 1 characters. The party makes its way through the Hillsfar countryside, encountering several strange occurrences, including demons, corrupted livestock, and tainted crypts. The long introduction. The module sets out with the party encountering a madman on the verge of death. The madman has a chore list that works as the MacGuffin for the 5 mini adventures. Mission 1, The Birth. The first step on the madman's MacGuffin list takes the party to an orphanage in the wilderness. The orphanage is inhabited by several non-human children carrying out a series of tasks before dinner, as well as a human couple that has taken them in and the couple's sextuplet children. Before supper, the party is assigned to chores as well. They need to find Penroth, which can be done with the assistance of his sisters, as they know where he's gone. They can track him to a pasture where they encounter wild dogs. The other point of interest is the barn, where the halfling by the name of Werner is worried about a pregnant goat, Jovi. He's worried about her health, and that is when the oddities begin. The encounter has some very odd goats, one that is far too large for its age, also has 2 heads. The demonic beasts pose a threat that could be dangerous to the farm's inhabitants. If this were not weird enough, 5 more red-furred goats come out. After the goat encounter, the party is treated to dinner. Jake, we're kicking it off with another 5 mini adventures here. The the setup here is growing on me. I know the first season I was like, these are kind of a drag. The second season I kind of got over that. I'm at the point where I kind of feel like this is a good way to introduce a season at this point. Like, it
Don't be
works
too
out.
excited.
I mean, you know,
I mean, you can at least put it with a smile on your face. I mean, when you look at like one first season, they did it because it's always been a good intro to the factions.
mhm,
Because this one has Emerald Enclave, who's
sure.
protecting the Penroth, and it's just like what they've done with these. Even the intro for the when you get to the farm, you meet a half orc and a dwarf,
Mhm.
and their story was like, hey, we were from the orphanage and they kicked us out because of the great love, humanity, or whatever, and
Mhm.
from Hillsfar. So it gives a little bit of background to what's going on in the Hillsfar
Sure.
region. Followed up by you meet their parents that adopted all these kids, and then the wife who was like previously unable to have kids is like had 6 kids
Yes,
all at once,
very
and they
fertile.
also
Yeah,
had an extra finger on each hand and an extra
yeah.
toe, and it's like it kind of leads into some of this stuff that you kind of could piece together throughout the rest of the adventure.
Mhm.
Before I get back to this one
Mhm.
specifically, but there's mention of from the Emerald Enclave agent in this area that things that typically happen when there's wrongness that's been plaguing the land is there's birth defects,
Mhm.
there's extra limbs, extra
Sure.
parts,
And
and you're
and
like,
some of these defects go back to older editions too. In third edition, tieflings weren't these like horned, tailed creatures. They were like a human character who had one extra finger, or had horns, or had a tail, or
yeah,
had sharp teeth. Like it was these subtle like differences rather than
your
like
demon spawn.
the typical tiefling we see today, right? That was more of a fourth edition kind of shift. And so I
Yeah,
like I like the nod to like demonic corruption in older editions here. Um, I don't know. I think it's set up well and introduced well.
this mod in general, this even though it's an hour, like this could clearly be more. If you're as a DM wanting to go and dig into this, there's enough interactions with the mom that who's like cool with strangers being here, just like at least help, but we'll cook for you.
Right.
Like real small things, and it's like a very southern hospitality, like how I felt like that's how
Sure.
she was about. And after that, the encounter with the goats was always an interesting one because I felt when you're like, oh, I'm gonna go figure out where Werner or where Penroth is. There's a scream from the from the farmhouse,
Mhm.
and you go and watch the birth of this thing happening. You're like, what is going on?
Mhm.
And this can affect combat because the goat just gave birth. Jovi just gave birth to this like horse almost, and then 5 other goats, and it's like, whew. And at that point, the party goes off and does like they've quelled the situation because the dying goat, because of carrying this other thing
Sure.
around, has been taken care of for the moment. Sending him back out to the like farther out pastures, grabbing the kid from the wolves, which can be a really short encounter for a DM, because how it's worded is if half of them die, they just leave.
The rest flee. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if like the alpha dies or something like that, and like these dogs only have like less than 10 hit points. Like
Yeah.
one good swing, or a competent party that's not like, let's just go one-on-one on each one of these guys.
Mhm.
Like it can actually end the encounter pretty fast, which is nice, because then that's not the main encounter. The main encounter is when they come back and there's like a horse goat
Yeah.
with 2 heads.
I mean, the other thing to consider there is like if you're pressed for time, you can just cut the dog encounter because it's not
make it
really
cinematic, make it a skill
narratively
challenge.
relevant. Make it a skill challenge. Yeah, I mean that's what I'm doing all over the place right now. Is like if an encounter doesn't seem super meaningful, we'll use an exploration approach and try to just do a skill challenge to figure out how to bypass the encounter or how to deal with it. Like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that exploration is largely underutilized as a tier relative to combat and social, and I think finding ways to build it in is going to be very successful in terms of like rounding out character sheets and getting characters interested in their skills and stuff too.
I do have one complaint with this first mission.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it felt like a very sitcom end, in terms of how it was like, can we ask you some questions? And there wasn't much support for like the questioning that I feel would be very natural.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were like to the mom was like, you just had 6 kids. You said sextuplets.
That's odd,
and they
right?
all have an extra digit
Yeah.
on every single hand.
Yeah.
Like, and then it's like I felt like the end of it was kind of fade to black, and like the mom just like looking at the screen going like, it just happens, and then like you see and then like that's where it zooms out from, but then you kind of pan out farther, and then you see like the rest of the adventures going like, wait, hold, stop, and like they're not stopped, but like
Right.
she's like, and I feel like that was a little lacking.
I don't know. I think some of it, like, maybe it can be tongue in cheek. Like there's a lot of like.
It's an intro to the problems, but it felt a little. And the thing is we have a great Monday Wednesday group, and they kind of roll with the punches. They knew more was coming. It wasn't like they didn't come in with the idea that this was going to be a 1 hour. This was like a standalone. We're done after tonight. Like,
and
we're
I
gonna
guess
keep
like
discussing it.
any questions the party would have can be addressed in the next 4 mini adventures too.
Yeah.
So like part of that is like, yeah, we could spend a lot of time here talking with this lady, or we could move on.
I just think there was enough there that there could have been like, has anything happened recently? Because like, we had a horse come out of this, a 2-headed horse essentially, and 5 red furred goats out of like a not red furred goat.
Yeah. Yeah.
But really cool piece. I know we're all supposed to be not cool about it, but the nice part about it is we have an item that's given, a silver sickle that's given for follow. I do like with these mini adventures, they typically have resources that are given within the mods
to help in the next
and they're not magic items. It's just like, hey, that could assist later on.
Sure. That's true. Mission 2, the growth. The party's second stop is at a beet farm where red plume guards are shaking down a young half-elf named Constance. Constance's parents have been killed, but if the guards find out, she'll lose the farm. She needs to misdirect them for a few months before she can properly inherit it, otherwise it'll be deeded to the city of Hillsfar. Fighting the guards will likely end poorly for your party, but if they are successful, this leads to even more bad news for Constance, as it attracts even more attention from Hillsfar. After the guards leave, Constance leads the party to a cellar where her parents' bodies remain. She found them dead and is trying to hide them until she can inherit it. Along with her parents' bodies is a drow suffering from the same affliction her parents died of. Soon, bounty hunters come to take the drow for abandoning his house in the Underdark. After fighting off bounty hunters, the drow will recover in time, and Constance can keep her secret long enough to inherit the farm. Jake, where are we going here? What is this? How's this shakedown?
Well, you show up and it's like in the midst of the ending of a shakedown, and she's like,
Yeah,
"And good riddance,"
yeah,
and like, but she's like, "But like, don't arrest me,"
right.
and
Just like,
it's
yeah, you
kind of
go. No, please go.
actually, please go. It's interesting because some party probably was crazy enough to go, "Yep, I'm gonna fight these red
Toe to
plume
toe with these red
guards.
plume
Yeah,
guards.
like
Yeah,
let's totally let's fight," and that's why they've had to include that there. Which it's neat because the guards themselves are asking for casks of red dye to be used for their shirts, the red
yeah,
plume guards,
for their
and they're
plumes.
like, "We need so much by tomorrow," and it's
It's a
like
lot. It's a lot of dye
it's
to dye
six,
some
eight
plumes.
casks of
Like,
red dye.
it's so
Like
much dye for
that's
feathers.
not an overnight experience. Like, and I do like the fact that this is like a very practical, real life application of what happens with shakedowns from guards,
Mhm.
and it really stands to the fact that these guards are more bullies than anything else, and like
Yeah.
that's something that we'll find more and more throughout season 3.
Mhm.
That they're just henchmen. They're like a
Sure.
glorified henchman, but like they do mean well with an asterisk,
Sure.
and that asterisk is if how much you pay.
Right. They mean
And
well. They just don't know well.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they're carrying out the backstory. Even with the red plume guards, is like they were exiled for a bit after one of the kings that always gets taught like cycled through, because if you become named in this game and you're higher up, you die. Um, cycled through, and then the Great Law of Humanity came out, and then all these other things happen, and the Red Plume Guards are reinstated, and they're just like thugs,
Mhm.
like not bad guys, just thuggy look dudes built like brick walls,
Yeah.
and they just kind of do whatever needs to get done. And sorry for the tangent, but at the same time,
Sure.
it
I
kind
think
of
I think it's
gives it's
informative
important.
to the module though. Yeah. I would say like the combat, if your party decides to take on these guards, is going to be tough to begin
End
with.
the mod.
Just end the mod
End the
there.
mod.
Just like you guys don't
Because
succeed. See ya.
if
Like,
well no the other problem that happens is like there's a full section, like half a page, on what happens if you mess with those guards.
yeah.
If you killed any of the guards, they find 20 more red plume guards just sitting there to arrest you.
Yeah.
Like, and the best part about it is like, if you resist arrest, you're killed. If you it's just there's like bullet points of what happens if you
Right.
mess with them. And red
And
plume
all
guards
of
are
them
not
end
like
with you being killed.
one fireball would be able to kill him, but you're level 1, like, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Your
And
acid splash is not going to cut it.
yeah, their 16 AC is gonna
Right.
run you over, and it is what it is. It's an interesting component because it's a very real life shakedown.
Mhm.
And if you wanted to, as a DM, put a little bit of more pepper into it, you could maybe have you'd have to work this out beforehand, of course. Kind of have like a two-way conversation with yourself, like have like a little earlier in the conversation
Mhm.
about what's happening and what they're requesting and all these things,
Mhm.
and seeing how like what happens to Constance. Like Constance, she's like is acting tough. Her parents are dead, and she knows where her parents are.
Right. Like that's the other and the big thing to keep in mind here is the only thing Constance needs to do is hold out for 2 months before, like, she has to pretend to be strong for 2 months, long
So
enough
she's
to
of
inherit the
age.
farm.
Yeah.
And then like whatever happens can happen, right? So as long as she can hold on for 2 months, everything's fine. So
I just think in general, this is a very cool mod. I don't think I really need to get into anything. This is a pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
I like the concepts it brings up more than anything else. The fight is kind of interesting with the Durgar. They're invisible, so it's your first real experience. These are new players with dark vision,
Mhm.
and what happens when you don't have dark vision. They're also like enlarged too.
Yeah.
It's a little it's a fun experience. Hillsfar, you get a taste of, we get more and more as we go through the season. You'll see more and more Drow, Underdark themes,
Hmm.
of course, because of the demons. But it's a cool little slap in the face immediately. And what these guys had on their face, like the reasons why they died, is an interesting little like disease, this rot, this what is it called? It's like dark rot or something like that.
Something like that.
Um and it's or darkborn rot, my bad. And no one can deal with it. We don't have like, you can't
Yeah.
just go like
You're a
scrape
level one.
off.
You might be a
Yeah.
level one cleric. Like, get the leeches out, but it's not gonna help.
Yeah, that's a very arm, like, oh, you know, it's on your arm, cut it off.
Right.
And I think it just, all in all, it's got a good story. It
Hmm.
has a little, and there is a nice little portion of this because there's like a skill challenge too
Yeah.
involved. When it's like, hey, by the way, you have to help her figure out 8 barrels of dye
Yeah.
by tomorrow. You know, how you gonna do it? And it's cool, and I love utilizing characters I like imaginations.
Hmm. And it put
And
it like the best thing about and it's about all skill challenges is it really puts the responsibility on the player to
yes,
get in touch with their characters and figure out what they're good at and how they can use that to their advantage in a
I
given situation.
I definitely enjoy skill challenges in general with my experienced players that have new players at the table,
Mhm.
because I can always lean on my experienced players to give me, it's not like, hey, so and so, here's some, tell me what you want to do.
Right.
And some people don't know how I DM.
Sure.
um but I can always lean on my players. You know, Brian, with you, like, I can be like, hey, what do you want to do? What would you do in this
Sure.
die making process? And it helps kickstart the engine.
Mhm.
And normally is a real good, 5-10 minutes, whatever that number is. And honestly, I really don't care what the DC is, as long as you give me like
Mhm.
a, if you roll a 5, I'll be like, yikes.
Yeah,
But like,
I mean, when I homebrew skill challenges, I set the default. It depends on the tier of the players, but usually for
yeah,
like tier one, I set the default at like a DC 10,
8 or 10 for me,
8 or
really.
10, and then like your justification will adjust that for me.
Sure.
A lot of the AL mods that include skill challenges will have the DCs built in.
Yeah.
But if they don't, or even if they do, make adjustments as you see appropriate. You know, like if somebody's making a real good argument, like maybe they don't even have to make a check. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm gonna stand on this and it's gonna squeeze this out. And
yeah,
I'm a heavy dwarf.
right,
All right.
all right.
All right.
I'm a bard and I'm going
That.
to sing a song to make people work harder. All right,
All
fine.
right. Whatever. Like, but this is also cool. You meet someone that was put in a bag who is a Zentrim agent. So now we have the Emerald Enclave in Zentrim, and that's a really neat
Yeah, and
experience.
that mattered once upon a time. You know, I guess it still kind of does if you have the right players, but um,
I'm still hopeful that they'll come back in 10 Town, but
you know, I'm one of my biggest disappointments with AL is them abandoning factions just because they didn't know what to do with them. Um, but that's, I mean,
it's a
it,
tough mechanic, I'll be
it
honest.
is. Yeah, it's an extra character creation thing to consider. It's, you know,
I
or
liked it because, like, either you can include it as much as you want, or you can not include it as
right.
much as you
Yeah.
want. And it just, when you have players that want to dig deeper than hucking
Mhm.
dice just a little bit,
Yeah.
um and it just feels like there's opportunity for more growth. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people in at least my local gaming group are very much about the, hey, I can't play D&D tonight, so I'm just gonna sit and read, like, build something on some character generator,
Mhm.
or I'm gonna go write some more about my backstory, or,
Sure.
you know, I invented squash, and you're like, okay, if you can defend it. I haven't had anyone
Right.
else to declare that they've
Right.
created
Yeah.
squash. Okay, cool. That's the kind of group that I'm in, and it was nice to have these. So I hope it does come back. I really don't know how it would be implemented much differently, but
Sure.
or much more different, but
Just have
I
more
think it'd be cool.
have them. I mean, it requires more work on the admin side, right? Like you just have to come up with more things that the factions are responsible for,
Sure.
and I know they're already, you know, overworked and understaffed as it is. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Mission 3, the life. The third stop on the list is at a sacred spring just inside the forest. The tension between the elves of the forest and the humans of Hillsfar is tenuous, but an alliance holds. There is no such alliance involving the jackal wares that have recently moved into the area. They're killing and devouring any pilgrims on the road. The most recent victim was Dottie. She's been taken. She's the teamster, the wife of a teamster named Whittle. The most recent victim is Dottie, the wife of a teamster named Whittle. The Jackalwares have taken her and wounded him. The party can pick up the trail, avoiding pit traps and finding a fairy dragon named Zook along the way. The party is met by two travelers on the road. These are actually Jackalwares in disguise. After the encounter, Zook leads the party to the spring and lets them know that as a direct servant of Myliki, he will protect the spring with her aid. There's a lot here. It's fun. I mean, the Zook encounter is cute, and I don't mean that in like a condescending way. Like it's
We haven't
it's a
encountered.
fun
There's not
encounter
many fairy dragon
anywhere,
encounters.
right? Like not AL aside, like they aren't a heavily utilized creature.
I mean, it's a neat thing, definitely.
Mhm.
I like this mod because of the follow up from mod 1, or I guess mission 3 versus mission 1.
Mhm.
This is the first time where the mods open like, yo, if you don't have something to deal with this,
Yeah.
like.
Mission 1 is here's a tool that you might need later, and mission 3 is, oh, where's that tool at?
But I do certainly like this mod because there's a lot of DM empowerment. There's ideas of, hey, if your characters can't do this, maybe they can. There was some words that were said that that were made like, hey, remind them of things happening, and it gives, and I know it's so vague to say, but Jackalware aren't affected by X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But if you did, mission 1, you had a vial of alchemist fire. You had a silvered sickle. The guy Whittle was like, here, take my dad's like crappy silvered scimitar.
Right.
There's resources, and it gives the DM more. I say more responsibility because that's already our job, but it gives them the responsibility of saying, hey, if your players are stuck, give them a nudge.
It also gives you tools, right? Like, I mean, having this magical beast with you and an extra, I mean, admittedly commoner, gives you tools if your party runs into trouble.
Exactly.
And it gives you a narrative out to not be like, oh, actually, you don't die, I guess. You know what I mean?
And like, so there was one. Here's the one I was looking at. It says, for example, using the power conferred onto Zook by Myliki, she can make a fighter's non-magical sword glow with radiance for 1 round if the fighter sacrifices 2 or 1d4 hit points. I'm like, that's damage.
Yeah. Yep. It overcomes damage resistance. It's huge, and that's the big thing with these like low level adventures is anytime things have damage resistance and you don't have a way to get past it, it's double the length of the combat, right?
Yeah, and I even going further than that, like there's some really neat aspects of this mod, like so for instance when people meet people on the road, like the thing to note, there's a pile of bodies that are like sitting there, and my party was very like, does it look like they're startled? I'm like, how I roleplayed because their insight check was high, was they were like, bodies versus like bodies. Like the second one sounds more excited than scared, but I don't,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, and those checks are what bring skill checks into the game, and I think those are valuable. I could easily see a party just like not thinking, like the reason that we were able to come up with those ideas is because we've been playing for 20 plus years.
Sure.
I could see a new party being like, oh, 2 farmers on the road, and like, look out, there's Jackalwares afoot.
Well, that was kind of like part of the fun because it's like either the players will let me have it or they won't. It just depends.
Yeah.
And either way, this was a fun adventure, and you get to have the decision of, hey, do I have Do we have Whittle alive at the end of the adventure? There's a lot of goodness here, and it's a solid 1 hour adventure that probably will end up in my back pocket
Mhm.
if when conventions restart.
Yeah.
That if somebody say like, "Hey, do you have 1 hour to run?" I'd be like, "I'd prefer not to, but
Yeah.
here's one I have just in case." And it's not a hard mod.
Mm-mm. It's pretty
Like,
straightforward. I also like the other thing I like about this is, we've talked about earning favors as kind of compensation for these modules. And I like the idea of having access to like a direct servant of my leaky in a pinch. Um, even if it's like very separated from the goddess herself, like having access to a fairy dragon who like knows his stuff. Like if you're like, I can't figure out this nature issue, I need some more resources to do something with the beasts in the region, like hitting up Zook and being like, hey man, this is the situation we're in, is definitely still on the table
well,
if you're
she's
playing with the
also
same party regularly,
well, she's also a Harper agent, which is even funnier. Which is like she's not only a thing of Mia Leakey, it's also an ally of the Harpers. It's
Right.
like, and she said she'd give a glowing report to her contacts regarding any characters who would be interested in joining the Harpers.
Sure.
So maybe that is a way to be like, yo, I can be your contact. And I don't want to say I'm forcing somebody to be a Harper, but maybe a Harper adjacent. But if
Right.
I was playing with the same table day in and day out, I'm not gonna. They don't need to change their faction background, but like
Right,
if
and
they
like
said, "Hey, we're aligned with Harper behavior
Mhm.
because there's so much," and this is gonna actually stem a lot in less on the season. We see it more now, or I guess in season 3 we'd see it more now. More missions that are like, "Hey, if you're not part of the Order of the Gauntlet, if you're not part of XYZ faction, you miss an entire part of an adventure."
Mhm.
Where I'm kind of like my plan is hey, who would you mostly align to? Not necessarily taking on their role, but like it adds more. Like a 3 hour mod or 4 hour mod might be 3.5 hours or 3 hours without
Yeah.
a secret mission,
Mhm.
without everyone's involvement, because that was something that was like so important. It was like, hey, I got it with one that got me an extra 2 points on my faction renown, and now I can do X, Y, and Z. Now
Yeah.
I can be a mentor, whatever it is. That's something that is important because these little things, these little nods, are still important enough to be made aware of as a DM, because there's so much faction involvement in 3, less in 4, and I think in 5.
There's none in 4. The
Yeah,
factions can't get
so it's like
Barovia.
2. It's like 1, 2, 3, and 5. I believe have the factions in it.
Yeah.
7 I think is where we were booted.
I think so. Yeah.
I don't remember.
Either 7 or 8. Yeah, and I think it's important to realize there's a difference between being a member of the Harpers and knowing and having the trust of a member of the Harpers.
Yeah.
And even if you want to play into like the current status of factions, like these faction agents can still be out, underground somewhere.
Yeah.
And still have knowledge that's valuable for the party.
Yeah.
But just not be as accessible, right? And
Agreed.
I think like it's not unreasonable for them to be out in the wilderness, those kinds of things.
Doing their thing.
Mission 4, the death. The fourth stop for the party is a Rothe farm where some have said to have been raised as undead. The party finds a shaft and an elven woman named Lady Enedra. She's investigating rumors of elves consorting with demons and thinks whatever is down the shaft might have clues about the rumors. The party descends and encounters a trap and puzzle, followed by a challenging encounter with an additional puzzle component. The party must move the carcass being used for the ritual before a demon is created to attack. After the encounter, the players can return to Lady Enedra and report their findings. This is, first and foremost, this mission has an aspect to combat that I love to see, and that is a combat that is not about removing hit points from a thing, that there is some other secondary task related to a combat that is just as, if not more important, in interrupting this ritual.
And failure conditions.
And failure
conditions. So I like this because it's like, hey, by the way, it's a farm of just dead crap everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they're like, hey, can you go look this up? Like, go figure it out. And it's like, hey, by the way, there's a, which is to me the most ridiculous thing ever, a like 400-foot ladder going down.
Mm-hmm.
Just, yep.
It's a very long ladder.
It's just a long ladder, and
It's the
it's
kind
like,
of ladder that would require safety gear in today's world.
like, seriously, like, there's nothing to latch onto. Like, it's a little wild, but
mm-hmm.
it doesn't. It's like it's an automatic find. There's nothing about it. It's like, hey, there's a lot of dead stuff. This is weird. Oh no. Yeah. Gets to the bottom of the shaft. You find the lady in Edra. She's like, I'm not an adventurer, but can you figure that out? She's like, I'll give you some gold or something like that, and just, you know, find me. And like, doesn't give you a location where she is or anything like that. And it's just very quest giver-esque. Even though she took the time to unsafely go down this 400-foot ladder and then climbs back up, no problems. Like,
yeah, there may as well be a giant gold question mark above her head.
Yeah, there really should have been. And I do like this. I like her explanation where, like, the fairy and the elves, the demons, the, you know, combination of them. Mm-hmm. I really do like this because this is like the first answer we're really getting for any demon, like direct demon involvement. Mm-hmm. It's like straight up, like, right in your face, and it's from somebody with a big gold question mark above her head.
Yeah, and it's another throwback to older editions. You know, like Fairy were the elven versions of tieflings. I like seeing that old lore come through. It's not often. It doesn't often come up because of the kind of narrative shifts between 3rd and 5th edition. Mm-hmm. And so to see these like demonic winged elves show up again is pretty cool, I think.
Or at least the history of them.
Right, or like the lore.
But like, either way, I would love to see a Fairy just show up, because then it'll be like, oh my god.
Yeah.
But when we do have these events that we have this sort of thing happening, this is where character creation and just overall immersion, I think, really like happens. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't give you like a goblin just like took this place over, by the way. Right. You know, it's actually some involvement, which is super nice. Mm-hmm. And so realistically, I would go out on a limb to say this is an awesome little involvement. She also doesn't hide the fact that she's like, hey, by the way, Lord's Alliance.
Right.
So you know, it's definitely something that I like. I like the just everything about this part. Sorry, I ran. It's just a nice area.
Yeah.
You go forward, and there's a little puzzle, and it's supposed to be like, this is apparently where I'm supposed to get my Union DM break. That's where we get to the first like major puzzle that we've seen in these thus far in this 4 set of adventures, or 5 set of adventures, and we're in the 4th one, and it gives these beautiful descriptions of the room. You have demons standing across from elves. You get to the point where it's like, hey, we have this ridiculously long line of strain of letters, like TLLL, and then it's like, hey, you know, pass, you must speak the titles of each of the 3 divided by 3. And of course, I thought I got my Union smoke break. Wrong. It was like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Because my players are awesome and don't want me to have a break. And it was like that.
I think part of the issue is like
having people that have been playing D&D for 20 years.
Part of it is that. Part of it is like there is a lack of dearth in puzzles and riddles and like I see a lot of the same riddles come up in D&D.
Sure.
In many mods, right? And I think like that's sand, just like
time.
Sand, the letter E, time, whatever, you know.
Wind.
And be like, if you're writing mods and you've written riddle mods, you're probably guilty of it, and that's fine.
Go talk to Will Doyle.
Yeah. It's fine. It's just like, it means that the breaks that you are expecting are not going to come up, right?
Yeah, and it's like even to like they're like give the player a couple of minutes, and like I'm sitting here going,
it's not going to take a couple of minutes.
mm-mm, mm-mm.
Yeah, I don't know. And look, I don't fault authors for using generic riddles.
This was season 3. I'm not. I
That's
have
true.
to say though, this was season 3, so we didn't have many riddle mods yet. We didn't
That's
have
true.
much of a CC construction. This was probably
That's
like,
true.
oh my god, this is groundbreaking.
Right.
Now it's not.
Yeah, I mean, like, CCCs have really opened up like the riddle components, and that's where you see a lot of the same ones. But you know, it is what it is, right? It's just part of kind of writing
like
modules in this like super organized play system. I don't know. That's
also
part of the participation.
Next part. We're just gonna run through the next part real quick. The Abyssal Maws component, which is the funniest one ever. Make sure if you're running on Roll20 that you have and cover up where the number 8 is, which is this also you turn it sideways infinity. So do that. That's my only big thing, because everyone was like, it was my fault, but also when you like kind of think about it for a second, it's like, oh, that makes sense. Like this should take all of like 25 seconds to like really get through, because it's like the floor and the rest of the walls are on a mosaic that obviously represent the abyss, the home of demons, the infinite layers of that horrific place, and it's like
infinity, you say?
Yeah. And that's just a small one. I liked it. I think it's funny how it just like
that's a good. You know, that is a good clue. That
it's not gonna take
your
long.
party,
It's a nice touch.
but it's a nice clue that if your party's not looking at the whole map and see an 8 next to a hallway, might stop them up for a bit.
And once again, this is not supposed to be like a lot, because you know there's always trial and error, which they jump through and they take 3 points of necrotic damage. And that makes them think. They're like, what is the? Because if I reread it again to a party and I said the infinite layers, they're like 8. Oh, got it.
Yeah.
I believe a lot in my group, and I was never gonna give them the ability to say, unless we were 5 minutes into it, I'm like, come on, guys. Like, it says, if it's difficult, a character succeeding on a perception check notices there's the dust on the floor in front of the portal 8 has been disturbed, likely by passage of person or persons unknown. I'm never gonna give you that info. I'm sorry. Like, you're gonna have to work this one out. Like unless you're just also, killing yourself here.
Right, and 3 damage. I know you're level 1, but as long as it's not the same person,
it's a tap on the wrist.
Yeah, it's not enough damage to make you not able to check all of them, with the 8th being the last, and still make it through. So
yeah,
I don't really think that's terribly.
And shame on them. It's part of the trial and error process. You know, I've had situations where my players have done similar things, and they just just gonna do it. I know my character during a CCC, he's a chef, and no one stopped him from tasting stuff out of vials.
Right.
And he said it tasted radiant, and then he took 30 damage. You know, things happen. We live and learn.
Right.
And now the sign for infinite is 8.
Right. Yep.
Then you move into the build a demon section. I like this because there's mains and dretches, and then the other guy who's crazy in the background.
Yeah.
But he's not doing anything. He's just laughing or whatever. The mains don't attack. All they're trying to do is just get 12 of them into the body. When that happens, combat's over. There's a few ways to do it. I'm not going to run through every single one, but it's just the potential of summoning a Goristro is crazy, because this dude just stitched together a thing and it became something and it worked. Is neat. And there's a fail condition. It's if this happens, it's something horrifying has just been unleashed into an unsuspecting world. It's not tier 2 or whatever tier the appropriate adventures couldn't deal with it. It's just y'all made a mistake. Whoops.
And there's a couple of ways to keep that from happening. The idea is this corpse is locked down with 4 padlocks to the table. Yeah. You can use athletics. You can use lock picking. I'm sorry.
Be creative.
Tools. figure out a way, you know, like maybe your
Somebody
barbarian
cast
just
chill
starts
touch on it.
maybe your barbarian just starts hacking limbs off. Who knows? Like whatever, but it still takes a full action for a round. Um, you know, let everyone that is at the table find a way to participate in it if they all want to. Um, other
Yeah,
than that, I
and
think
that's
it's pretty
really it with
straightforward.
that. I mean, you're not fighting the Garistro, you're not fighting any of that, but it's just a nice little touch, and
Mhm.
it's good to do.
Yep.
And I think that it's another good adventure. I think this whole series is a
Mhm.
pretty good set of adventures.
Mission 5, The Afterlife. The fifth mini adventure takes the party to a graveyard dedicated to the Church of Joaquin. Immediately, the party is encountered by two cultists and two Rothe zombies. After dealing with the cultists, the party finds a crypt that is not dedicated to Joaquin as presumed. The party finds several more cultists as well as a priest being possessed by a shadow. Four braziers empower the shadow and should be interrupted in order to make quicker work of the shadow and save the priest. After the encounter, the priest offers up a reward for saving him. Jake, I was a little. I like puzzle components to combat. To see them back to back is a little bit. I just don't feel like this mission was different enough from the last one. Um,
Uh, I I agree
and
with
I mean, you
you.
can disagree. I mean, I could be off
No, I
base, but
agree in the sense that I would have liked it tuned because I'm trying to run it so I have the best, clearest interpretation of how this goes.
Mhm.
I think that you encounter a shadow.
Mhm.
I think the explanation I thought I did was kind of cool. Is like the guy reaches towards you, and then like another hand comes
Mhm.
out of his hand, like an ethereal hand, and
Sure.
touches you. And that first strength drain, that that is the best face from anybody when they get like a 2 or 3 strength drain and they have a
At tier
max of
one, at
8.
level one, yeah.
They're like,
Like
oh no. Like, everyone kind of like went quiet, like, oh, that's what we're dealing with.
you can hear people pucker through the internet.
Yeah, you could
Like,
hear the glass, like the glass shatter. Like you could just hear it.
mhm.
And there's not enough shadows, I think. There's like they're mentioned here and there,
Mhm.
but it's always like the pinnacle fight, or like you're almost at your apex fight. You'll encounter like one shadow, and then like he'll hit someone, and then they'll make a save or whatever it
Says the
is,
guy
and
who
it's
lost
like
a character to a combat with 6 shadows.
twice,
Twice.
twice. 2 separate mods too. I think it might have been same DM as well.
That was me both times, yeah.
No, it was
No?
Greg, and it was Greg and you.
Yeah.
Either way, so I do like the idea. I think I just didn't. The room's too big.
Yeah.
There's there's too few cultists. Like, I almost like the idea of like you pull packs. Like in
Mhm.
any video game, you can pull mobs. And I felt like some guys aren't like their whole thing was like they get advantage from attacking from behind a brazier, and it's like,
The
okay,
brazier isn't like full cover, but
well,
alright.
whatever. They don't see them.
Yeah,
Either way,
I think part of the thing here is like first of all, you have to assume that your party will think to interrupt the braziers. Even though like every time you hit the priest, like the braziers flare up.
yeah,
Which should be a clue, but you have to assume that your party is going to take those clues,
and
and
throw them out
then
the
you have to
window.
assume your party is going to be able to get to the bridge. Like the room is so big that it's 3 rounds of combat for somebody to get over to the far side for the brazier.
I just my issue I think belongs in stat blocks, and I don't like that. Like the big question is then it brings in subdual and non-lethal combat, because it's clearly not this dude's fault,
Right.
Ezri's fault, whatever his name is, or Herb's fault. It's like he was possessed.
Mhm. And doesn't
Like
seem to be a member
he's
of this cult that
yeah,
these other
he not
cultists
only
are
that,
from.
he's a member of like Jurgle. He's a cult. He's a accountant of Jurgle. Like, he's just trying to get like the priest of Jurgle, who's just like just trying to get inventory of the dead buried here. He's just doing his job.
Right.
To the T, where Jurgle does the same thing. He's doing that, but he was possessed.
Mm-hmm.
And shadows to me are so neat. It's just this combat just felt so underwhelming.
Yeah, I guess part of it is it feels underwhelming because we keyed in right away, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if it takes a couple of rounds for the party to realize, oh, we should knock over those braziers.
Because after 2 are down, he can't strength drain.
Right.
Which I'm not saying you should do every turn unless you're a resentful DM.
I mean, but the benefit of that is these are level 1 players typically.
Yeah.
At least tier 1. The mod is aimed at level 1, so strength drain gets real once 3 people are dead. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. My concern here is I like extra components to combat encounters, but to have 2 in a row back to back. I mean, they're not even split in this module, but as mission 2 and mission 5, it's 4 and 5 in a crypt with a possessed or crazy priest.
But if you think about each one does. The first one lesser so, but the second one with the growths, how those work. I mean, essentially when you go fight 2 Durikar is invisible, so it comes down to a semi of a puzzle of having light.
Sure. Yeah.
The life one is the silvered weapons.
Yeah, and
each one's got a component. Maybe not as
they're trying to play out mechanics one at a time and get players used to it.
Alternate solutions.
Yeah.
And I agree though. This is a very the 4th one was boom. This is wave defense, or you have to figure it out. 5 was I don't know. Maybe they ended with 4.
Or I think honestly, I think if they flipped mission 4 and mission 3 or mission 2, it wouldn't feel so pressed together, right? If there was some kind of intermediary between the two, I wouldn't have noticed the very similar thematic and setting kind of components. But
I even guess I was venture to say number 5 doesn't really fit. In terms of I do not recall any really major demon presence here. That really shot out at me. Why would a shadow be involved? Why are the undead being involved? I understand that demons have the capacity to have undead armies and the but it doesn't smack me as hard as
yeah, and it
4.
seemed the cult is to Grast rather than Orcus, right? If it was Orcus, it'd be oh, undead, sure. But it's a cult of Grast instead, so it just doesn't seem very on brand for the god of lust, the demon of lust and revelry.
This reminds me of the last mission from 2-1, where they just threw Red Wizards of Thay out of left field into your face, and you're well, I guess they're here.
Right.
And
they may as well be in Mulmaster.
When you consider the rest of season 3, there are undead components that exist. I just don't think. I mean, there's just so much more to be done.
The way that this module sets it up is as if undead components are going to make up for 1/5 of the season.
I mean, there are 64 mods. It feels
sure.
But it just I'm at a loss. It's not a bad mini adventure. I have my reservations. I think the rooms are too big. I think the people in it aren't, because you bottleneck in the front, or maybe if what happened, you were to put further back, but he's the first person you see. And then you have cultists around the room. I think there's better ways to retool that area. Maybe you scrap maybe you make your own map, and I know it's a lot of extra work, but I would make it I don't know. It just, this is a good small mod. It hits you in the face, but it's just people are gonna focus on this guy from the very beginning, and then you're just well, I gotta deal with 6 cultists. I'm wrap it up. Let's go. I need to go to bed. Let's that kind of thing. I'm look, we're getting out of here, and I don't think it's a bad mod.
Sure.
I don't think any of these are bad mods.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's small adjustments you can make to make them flow.
Mm-hmm.
They're independently good.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think some of the issues here are it doesn't feel like the other like -1 mods, right? Like I think 1-1 and 2-1 have like this home base that you're constantly going back to and like striking out again.
They could have
3-1, this
made
like walk
Elven
through the
Tree.
woods. Yeah, something. But this like walk through the woods is kind of, or if like the orphanage was the first adventure and also where you're staying, you could make that adjustment.
Yeah, you could absolutely do that. I think that would probably be the way to go.
I
Or make
like,
Elven Tree. Do a little bit of research
yeah.
on where the rest of these mods are.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's this is a good easy pickup convention mod, but once again, conventions are a little bit more planned nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the time, I would read a little about Hillsfar. Pull it up, Google it, like read about what the problems are. Look up Elven Tree.
Right.
Look up Season 3's primer. There's a lot of your jump off points are from like Elven Tree. Like just go with it. I don't know. And I agree with you. I thought 2-1 was actually a really, I think because of that base of operations kind of thing was really interesting. Looking back and doing 3-1 so many weeks later. 2-1 felt a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
In terms of, I say downtime, but like just knitting your story together.
Sure.
Without much extra work.
I think setting is under recognized as valuable in a lot of these modules, in a lot of modules overall. Like the setting really adds something in terms of not only like a base of operations, but also just like fleshing out the region, like having a tavern or an inn or
a familiarity with characters,
some kind of touchstone to come back to.
The only other thing I could understand from here is that's what it feels like to be in about or around Hillsfar, because people are not welcomed. And
yeah, I
still think
true.
that the orphanage would still have been the place to go.
Yeah.
But that kind of speaks to what you're doing in about Hillsfar. It's like there's only like a couple mods that actually goes into Hillsfar, because like you're not allowed in if you're not human unless you're going to fight in the gladiator pit. Spoilers. But it's
sure.
That's I'm pulling at the strings, I feel like.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, so there it is, DDEX 3-1 Harried and Hillsfar. Thank you so much for listening to some advice to streamline and renovate your tables. Be a good neighbor, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe. Support us on Patreon, where you can find the playthroughs to inform these videos at the $5 tier. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And from now, until the next time, roll together.